This stuffed pizza would be known in Italy as a rustic tart or torta rustica, and you won't find any pepperoni in here. Instead, the crispy dough is filled with sausage, leeks, and Swiss chard, which will make for one of the most memorable slices of pie you've ever had. We'll start the dough by mixing 1 teaspoon of dry yeast and 1 teaspoon of honey or sugar in 80 milliliters of warm water, ideally around 105 degrees. Then let that sit for a few minutes so the yeast can activate. It should become very foamy. Then pour it in a large bowl and add 130 milliliters of warm milk and 1.5 teaspoons of olive oil. Next, we'll add 2 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. I did it in 2 stages so it's a little easier to mix. Stir with a wooden spoon until most of the flour has been absorbed. Then add the rest of the flour, and once it becomes a shaggy dough, you can dump it onto a floured surface to start the kneading process. Start folding it on top of itself while pushing down with the heel of your palm. Use your other hand to guide the shape of the dough so it remains fairly circular. After each fold, turn it 90 degrees and keep going. If you feel it getting sticky at any point, you can sprinkle on some more flour. We'll knead it for about 10 minutes to develop the gluten. The dough should become smoother and more elastic throughout the process. Make sure you work the dough into a uniform ball at the very end. Place it back in the mixing bowl with a little flour on the bottom and the top. Cover with plastic wrap and poke a few holes before letting it proof in a warm spot for 2 hours. In the meantime, we'll make the filling by preparing 2 large leeks or 3 small ones. Chop off the root end and peel the outer layer. Then separate the dark green tops, which can be saved to make vegetable broth. Slice the leek in half lengthwise before giving them a quick wash. Leeks can have a good amount of dirt, so rinse each layer with cold water. Once they've all been washed, place them back on the cutting board to cut them into slices about 1/4 of an inch thick. Next, we'll also give 1 bunch of Swiss chard a quick rinse. These are slightly bitter, which will go very well with the sausage and leeks. To prepare these, first remove the leaves by running your knife along both sides of the stem. Then chop and remove the bottom inch of the stems and cut them into about 1/2 inch pieces. For the leaves, try stacking them into a uniform pile, then cut them in half lengthwise before giving them a rough chop. In a large skillet on medium heat, add 12 ounces of sweet Italian sausage and begin breaking it up. Let it cook for a few minutes until it's almost completely browned. Drop in all the leeks along with a tablespoon of olive oil and a sprinkle of salt. Stir until everything is combined very well, and then turn the heat down to low so the leeks can cook through slowly. Add a tablespoon of olive oil to another pan of medium-low heat along with a clove of crushed garlic. Let that fry for 30 seconds before adding the Swiss chard stems. These need a head start from the leaves, so let those saute for a few minutes while keeping an eye on the leeks. Then add all the leaves, and much like spinach, these are going to wilt and shrink a good amount. After you've mixed them in, add a touch more oil and a sprinkle of salt, and let them cook for another minute or so. By now, the leeks should have also reduced in size and become caramelized. Finish the Swiss chard with a squeeze of lemon, which will cut the bitterness. Now let both pans cool while you wait to roll out the dough, which after 2 hours should have doubled in size. Place the dough on a floured surface and cut off 1/3. We'll use the larger piece for the bottom and the smaller piece for the top. So take the larger one and carefully open the dough with the bottom of your hands. Push it into a rough circle shape with the tips of your fingers and then add a dusting of flour. Now use your rolling pin to do the rest of the work. Always put the pin in the center of the dough and roll to the edge before picking it up and placing back in the center. Go around the dough until you have a large circle. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be a couple inches larger than your cooking vessel and a little thicker than 1/8 of an inch. I like using a 12-inch cast iron skillet, but you can use any large circular pie dish or Pyrex. Grease the bottom of the pan with a thin layer of olive oil and optionally dust it with cornmeal for some added texture. Carefully lay the dough over the pan and have the excess hang off. The dough is going to suspend over the bottom of the pan, so before you try to push it in, add the first layer of cheese, which will help weigh it down. Here I used about 4 ounces of grated fontina, but you could also use mozzarella or provolone. Now carefully pick up the edges so the dough falls in place, and then push it against the sides of the pan. Now you can spoon on the Swiss chard in an even layer. Then grate a small amount of Parmesan cheese, and next is the sausage and leeks. So add the entire mixture and also smooth it out until it's evenly distributed. And finish with a little more Parmesan cheese. Back on the floured surface, roll out the top of the dough and do it in the same fashion as the bottom, except this one is going to be slightly smaller and thinner. But don't make it paper thin like I did here for some reason, just about 1/8 of an inch will work. Remove any excess dough from the bottom crust by running a sharp knife along the edge of the pan. Then place on the top layer of dough, which should also go over the edge. Match it up evenly and push it into the sides of the pan. Go around the dough with your knife again to remove the excess from the top, which will help seal the two doughs together. Now for the fun part, form the crust. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect or close to pretty. Here I just pinched and twisted the dough pieces together and tightly folded it over on a diagonal. Then went around the entire crust until I ended up with whatever design you call this. Cover the pan with a kitchen towel while the oven preheats to 400 degrees. Once you're ready to bake, brush on some olive oil and be more generous around the crust. Give it a sprinkle of salt before making some incisions to allow the steam to come out while it bakes. Place it on the bottom rack of your oven so the bottom can cook through before the top gets too dark. It needs to cook for 35 to 40 minutes. At the 15-minute mark, turn it 180 degrees and cook for another 15 minutes. After 30 minutes, if it's your desired level of golden brown, place a sheet of foil on top before putting it back for the final 5 to 10 minutes. Once cooked, take it out of the oven and let it cool before removing from the pan. Now do whatever you gotta do to get it on a wired rack, like propping it up with 2 forks and picking it up with your hands. Or you could just use a couple spatulas. Let it cool even further before slicing into it and enjoying. Now whether you call this a stuffed pizza, rustic tart, or just a pie, you won't be able to get anything quite like it outside of your home kitchen. And you should try making more with your favorite combination of fillings.